And welcome to the And Then Right podcast. I'm your host, Stacey Walsh, and this is episode 32, Ask for What You Need. Thank you for joining me again. Well, welcome to 2021, the year that couldn't get here fast enough. If you've been following along in recent months, you'll know I took a 3-month hiatus from the podcast at the end of last year and invited guest hosts to record their own episodes. And while I remain grateful to have amazing past guests who are willing to generate their own content for the podcast, and desperately needed the break for many reasons, big and small, well, I still missed doing the podcast. So it was with more than a little enthusiasm and excitement that I began planning this episode last month. I started making lists in my mind of things I wanted to say. I remembered critical lessons I learned over the course of the last 12 months, etc., etc. Mostly, I was excited to get back into the swing of it, that rhythm of familiarity. I've missed it. It felt normal. Okay, you can't see me doing air quotes, but I've been craving normal. And then, and what was the final middle finger of 2020, my dad got COVID. The person we worked so hard to protect, knowing how vulnerable he is, got COVID. I had to call him an ambulance twice, a long story in and of itself, and then he was hospitalized for 5 days. Despite likely having a mild heart attack, he's considered a light case. And honestly, he is lucky. So for the past several weeks, and still presently, life has blown up again. My good intentions, my attempt to return to familiar rhythms, well, nope. Just nope. I don't want this entire episode to be about COVID or my dad, but oddly, there are some parallels between what's happened the last few weeks and what I was going to talk about in the first place. But before I jump into all that, I want to say this. It really sucks not being able to help someone you love in an immediate way. My dad getting COVID was not the first time in the past year that I wasn't able to help a loved one going through a challenging stretch in a way I normally would, which usually means showing up. There was no physically showing up to hug my dad, or my friends diagnosed with cancer, or my friends who lost their husbands this past year. All I could do was support from afar, and while yes, that still counts, it certainly doesn't substitute showing up with a meal or some flowers or a hug. Why am I talking about this at all? Well, one of the lessons I learned repeatedly in 2020, and one I already knew, but had never been hammered home in such a harsh way, we have very little control over anything. And this is always true in my life, sometimes to a greater extent than those I know, simply based on my husband and I being self-employed with erratic work schedules and uncertain income. But this past year decided to up the ante and illuminate all the other realms in which I have no control. All the ways I'd planned to nurture my writing life this past year, poof, gone. My writing schedule, now that kids are home 24/7 and I'm working more freelance hours than ever, poof, gone. All those lovely little pockets of quiet time I'd built into my schedule in the name of rest or self-care or whatever other label you'd like to slap on it, poof, gone. And every time it felt like we were finding our footing at home, our schedule would once again change abruptly. The kids' school year ended and virtual learning stopped. Then getting through the summer months with kids while working from home close to full time. Oh, and now it's time for the kids to go back to school, except now we're homeschooling. Yikes. Here's the thing. It sounds so much like I'm complaining. And in some ways I am, although it's less about complaining and more about acknowledging the actual grief that all those little losses triggered last year. I wasn't angry. I don't feel cheated. I've simply felt sad, often, this past year. and overwhelmed, and often unsure of how to best move forward in a world that has no clear timetable, no clear answers on when we'll be out the other side of a global pandemic. So yes, very little control over anything ever. What did this mean for my writing life in particular? Well, from March until about September, I wrote almost nothing for myself. Even if I found a few minutes here or there, my brain wasn't having it at all. My goal for last year was to complete a solid draft of my manuscript by the end of December. By the end of September, I had to acknowledge that goal was no longer realistic. And I started to beat myself up. Why couldn't I get up earlier? Stay up later? Stay off screens more? There were minutes I could feasibly be doing some kind of work. Why wasn't I doing it? Was I just procrastinating? Was I just looking for excuses to avoid the hard work? I didn't let this negative self-talk continue for long, thankfully, although it still shows up in stretches. What I did do was recognize that we are all collectively going through a very big, very life-altering experience that has affected nearly every corner of our lives. I recognized that the grief this was triggering was also bringing up past grief. I had to admit there is no precedence for this in my lifetime, no roadmap to help get me through. All I could do was listen to my body and respect my limitations during this time. And then trust that when the time was right, I would find my way back to the work again. And so that is what this past year looked like. Beginning again and again and again. Almost getting into a new rhythm. Oh no, not yet. Looking for my footing again, setting down all progress, and then a few weeks later, finding my way back. The thing that has kept me going is this. I keep finding my way back. It might look different each time. It might not be pretty. It might take longer than I'd like most times. It might not even last very long before the next thing blows up. My dad getting COVID. That's been a big one. Getting it a week before Christmas, a time when we're traditionally sliding into all things holiday, only to be confronted with an illness that wreaks havoc on the body, and then not knowing what that would mean for him or our family, well, color me derailed. Which leads me to my second biggest takeaway of the year. I've had to stop trying to do everything myself. And let me clarify what I mean by that. So I own a business. 2, actually. And save for the accountant I finally hired a couple years back. Such a good move. Highly recommend. I do every other task for both businesses. I also help my husband in several small ways with both of his businesses, which in a normal year is a lot of work, but doable. This past year was a reckoning on that front. I can't do all of that, plus homeschool the kids, plus work on my own writing, plus take care of myself on any kind of basic level, plus shoulder whatever happens to be blowing up. I've had to learn, and this is difficult for me, when to set things down, no matter what the outside voices, or even the inside ones, are trying to tell me. And that's only the first step. The second step in this sequence, and the one that makes me sometimes squeamish, is asking for help. Now, I won't go into all the personal reasons why asking for help is so difficult for me, other than this. I come from a long line of stubborn, I can do it myself women. Also, and this is the most critical piece, there have been several times in my life when I've asked people I know and love for help, and then they didn't, which for a long time turned me off to asking anyone for anything. The truth is, we all need help sometimes. We all need a community to lean on. Sure, in the case of our businesses, we're reaching a point where we need to hire some work out, and that is asking for help, but not in the way I'm talking about here. This is about asking for what you need, right now, in this moment. The fact that we aren't able to be around each other physically the way we normally are makes this an even greater challenge, both in the asking for help and the giving of it. We have to get creative. We have to learn to be resilient. We have to be open to the possibility that even though this is difficult, it also may be a blessing in disguise on some days. Not all. Some of this nonsense can just fuck off already. I've had to ask for help many times this past year. Did I always get it? Nope. Was it difficult when people let me down? Yep. But there were also people who showed up, and okay, mostly virtually, but it counts, stepped up, and have supported me when they were able to. And I've done likewise when I could. I've seen this play out before when my mom was sick and dying. You learn a lot about people in your life when shit gets hard. You also learn a lot about yourself if you're willing to get quiet and listen. I'm still setting goals for 2021. They are cautious. They are not travel dependent for now. I still have dreams of retreats and gatherings and face-to-face memories, but I also have dreams of finishing this manuscript, getting an agent, launching my first online course, building a chicken coop, planting some apple trees, and learning to play more than 5 songs on my ukulele. Several of you have reached out, inquiring about retreats for this year, wondering if they're going to happen. And the short answer is, I don't know. I don't know what 2021 is going to throw at us. I don't know if I'm going to get to see any of you at a retreat this year, though I would certainly love to. Time will tell, and I will update everyone as I know more. What I do know is that there will continue to be challenges and uncertainties, and that I will need help on some level, and that I am getting a tiny bit better at asking for it and receiving it when it's offered. So now it's your turn. What could you use some help with right now? Do you need a friend to read a draft? Some quiet time and space to crank out some words? Someone to distract your kids so you can have a couple quiet hours to yourself? What do you need right now? Lean on your community, and when you're able, reciprocate for someone else. Sometimes we can help ourselves too. What's one thing you can set down today to create space for something you truly want to do? If you're comfortable sharing your responses with the group, head on over to the Facebook page, And Then Write, and give it a follow. If you'd rather message me directly, feel free to email me at andthenwrite@gmail.com. To listen to previous podcast episodes or to sign up for my newsletter, please visit andthenwrite.com. Thank you for listening today. I hope you'll join me again in a few weeks for episode 33.